Well, hello there. This is Pink Blue. Today is October the 20th, 2020. There's got to be something significant about that. But this is the full story. UFO Tic Tac, episode 142. So what I wanted to start with here is we all remember the New York Times came out with this article, and this was actually the second of two that they did. And it was on the trail of a secret Pentagon UFO program. And we remember seeing these images all over mainstream media. They came out with the story and very, very quickly changed into another story altogether. Now, at the what I'm leading up to is I have the link to the 3-hour interview with the pilot who was recording this video. So his full story, his background, what went into that. But let's go over a little bit more until we get to that point. So this was December 18th. The original story was released on December 16th, 2017. So this is, as we read resources from the Bible to history to, there's a lot of hints that we're not alone, and we never have been, as would be as said from many different communities. But here, Ralph Blumenthal released on December 18th, 2017, in an open world notice that UFOs do in fact exist. Now again, the downplay started, the conspiracy theory started, it got ripped apart, but we're going to progress through this up to the full 3-hour review. So here we have I'm going to read this first paragraph. Our readers are plenty interested in unidentified flying objects. We know that from the huge response to our front page Sunday article published online just after noon on Saturday, revealing a secret Pentagon program to investigate UFOs. The piece by the Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper and author Leslie Kean and myself, contributor to the Times after a 45-year staff career, has dominated the most emailed and most viewed list of lists since. People want to know the truth. It's not about fuzzy little green men. It's not about big-eyed bold. It's about knowing the truth of who we are, where we came from, whether or not a God exists, and what our relationship is to that God as a divine being, as somebody that we're clearly in the mirror image of, or as a spark of energy that started everything. We want to know the truth, because understanding the truth of who we are and where we came from not only lines up the truth within our souls as we create our mission and our path on this planet, but it helps us go in a direction that is useful for all humanity. By holding us back, we're preventing us to run forward. This is why it dominated the most email and most viewed lists for this gentleman's 45-year career. Kudos to Ralph and his team for releasing this information. Again, this was December 2017. This was one of the most celebrated days of my life for freedom to know that what we've suspected, what our body knows, what we've been searching for is actually true. And then the rip down began. So again, I'm going to leave the links here because this isn't the brunt of what we're looking for, but feel free to go back and grab the links and read the story if you'd like to. Now, of course, one of the proponents was Senator Harry Reid. He confirmed the UFOs interfered with U.S. nuclear missile sites. Now, this was actually October 8th, 2020. So this was this month, and this was on mysteriousuniverse.org. This is Paul Seaburn is the author. And he says, if they had been called upon by the president to launch the nukes, they could not have done it. Now, we hear this time and time again about nuclear shutdown. And there's explanations. And we hope we get the truth around that. Let me just read this first paragraph for you. Former U.S. Senator Harry Reid, known for instituting the Secret Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, AAWSAP, in the Defense Department to study UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomenon, which is now, instead of UFOs, they often refer to them as UAP, which Hillary Clinton came out and talked about during her pre-election campaign, appears in a newly released documentary on UFO cover-ups by governments worldwide. In this case, Reed is referring to numerous accounts by military personnel working at nuclear missile sites of UFO sightings over them, and some actual interference by the UFOs, including full shutdowns of the launch systems, resulting in the security crisis Reed describes in the trailer for the documentary. So again, I will put this link in here so you can look up more information on Harry Reid. Now, I have said this time and time again, and we've got to grab a hold of this. Again, as the stories came out, the unraveling quickly happens, the backpedaling, the lack of truth, to not know who we are, where we came from, to not know what else is around us, and not to know where we're going in the future. Especially during this election cycle, we're seeing so much of it's moved from white noise to actual follow the hand away from the truth. But I have said time and time again, we all know now that the term conspiracy theory was created by the CIA to start discrediting individuals, and not just discredit, but rip them apart, rip their lives apart. But what is a conspiracy theory? And we really need to examine today what a conspiracy theory truly is. And from my perspective, I think we need to grasp onto this. A conspiracy theory is a notion that you and or I or somebody has based on evidence of alignment in their own body or soul where they know the truth, and they have gathered evidence to support that truth. However, the propaganda of somebody else's narrative guiding us away from the truth, that propaganda, it speaks louder than the power of your own voice to get the truth out there. That's all it is. It's a power game. That does not take away from the truth of what is. That's what a conspiracy theory is. Let's not forget the truth. Our own bodies will align with the truth. We know internally what is the truth. Let's not let that rug be ripped out under us again. Now, here's the To the Stars Academy. They're the ones who help work with the New York Times in order to release the article. And the site says telling the stories of tomorrow today. So they're going into the media, storytelling via, I think, comic books and news stories to bring this out there. And this is much of what I understand Corey Goode is trying to do by bringing out the stories into mainstream through comic books, through things that kids will read, through things that adults will read, through movies, so that it's more mainstream and not about taking away from, hey, what crossed at Roswell. We are so far beyond that. We know the truth. Let's get into the next steps. So this, is, of course, was founded by Tom DeLonge of Blink 182. Again, much has been ripped apart about this person who stood for the truth. As we move forward, we had Luis Elizondo come out. He stood on the stage with Tom DeLonge and released the information. And let's look at this. Luis Elizondo opens up on why the Pentagon keeps changing their story on ATIP and UFOs. So Luis was apparently the director of AATIP. And this article, let me look at this again. This is hotair.com. And this was January 13th, 2020. That's this year. Looks like it was written by Jazz Shaw. And it says, one of the repeating things we've run across in our coverage of the ongoing story of Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, and the search for information about UFOs and UAP is the disconnect between what the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, TTSA, has said about Luis Elizondo and what the Pentagon has had to say about him. Would that surprise anybody? If you ask TTSA, Harry Reid, who requested the program initially, or Elizondo himself, he ran the program. If you run the question by the Pentagon, specifically spokesperson Susan Goff, Elizondo had no assigned duties in the Defense Intelligence Agency and was not involved with AATIP. Believe what you will. Okay, then we have NPR. This came out in December 21st, 2019. So we're looking at almost a year ago. And again, this first article that I had pulled up regarding the release was December of 2017. So this NPR article is 2 years later. Trump created the Space Force. Here's what it will actually do. Now, as you might recall, in August of 2019, Trump stood on the White House lawn and created the Space Force. Now, for any of us who have more than a pea-sized brain, we understand that it was not created in October of 2019. That's just when the public was made aware of it. How far back it goes has been well documented. But anyways, for the sake of argument, Trump made the Americans and the world aware of the Space Force in August of 2019. Now, this article, of course, NPR is looking into what it will actually do. So here's a group of the Space Force. When President Trump signed the $738 billion defense spending bill on Friday, he officially created the Space Force. It's the sixth branch of the U.S. Armed Services and the first new military service since the Air Force was created in 1947. Space is the world's newest war-fighting domain, President Trump said during this signing ceremony. Amid grave threats to our national security, American superiority in space is absolutely vital, and we're leading by enough. But very shortly, we'll be leading by a lot. The idea has widely been mocked when it was first floated, providing fodder for late-night news hosts, et cetera, et cetera. We won't go too far into this, but let's see here if it says. I'm skipping down here just a little. About 16,000 Air Force active duty and civilian personnel are being assigned to the Space Force. So they're stating they're pulling from the Air Force. As we know, this has been well embedded in the military for decades. So there's still a lot to figure out, including the uniform. Really, this is where we're going to go with what they're going to look like. This is the least of the issues. The Space Force will fall within the Department of the Air Force, but after 1 year, it will have its own representation on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, according to the text of the law that created it. That makes it similar in structure to the Marine Corps, which is part of the Department of the Navy, but has its own seat on the Joint Chiefs. Now, this is really interesting. Why is Trump saying that we need a Space Force? Well, let's dig a little bit deeper. The off-planet activity that we have has not been fully disclosed. We hear parts of it, we see a little bit, and then there's a lot of backpedaling. There's a lot of confusion about the truth. But why would NASA grant Nokia $14.1 million to build a 4G network on the moon? Now, this was released yesterday. So this was October 19th, 2020. This is on the Business Insider via Yahoo News. Author is Greg Steen. NASA gave Nokia $14.1 million to build a 4G network on the moon. Are you scratching your head? Telecom equipment supplier Nokia is building a 4G network on the moon to help astronauts control lunar rovers, navigate lunar geography in real time, and stream videos. NASA gave Nokia-owned Bell Labs a $14.1 million grant, interesting grant, for the project as part of its plans to establish a human presence on the moon by 2030. Let me pause here and point this out. The government has the funds. Why don't they do it themselves? One of the most simplest answers is FOIA. Under the Freedom of Information Act, individuals can demand to see and have information uncovered and revealed to them. Now, the FOIA is highly manipulated. So, as a federal employee, when I was being manipulated, and we've gone to that into a different episode, but at one point to stop the manipulation, I requested a series of FOIAs on myself. Just a simple small incident. And one, I was very, very surprised that under the FOIA, classified documents existed on me. What was also surprising, it was so far redacted that you could not even tell any of the facts of what were on the sheets of paper. So I requested another FOIA based on evidence that I already had, but I wanted validation from the federal government directly from them, and for just a few documents that I had already had run and would take less than 30 seconds for them to pull up their computer, put in the code, and print out. Send via email. It was that fast, already loaded via um, the algorithms that they had secured. So it was just a quick query to pull it up. They wanted to charge me over $7,000 for just a few months of that data, and then told me the rest was in storage and would cost over $10,000 for the remaining data that I was seeking. When in fact, I had already seen that it was not in storage. It was all pulled up and in the singular access points. So if we go back to this, the federal government will issue grants or projects or awards to private companies because private companies are not subject to FOIA. Additionally, as private companies find information or do their R&D and or develop and file patents, they retain the patents. The federal government does not, which gives a level of protection. And in a typical life, there's often a lot of conversation about money. Well, who's going to pay for this and how's this going to happen? There isn't an understanding the same about money when you don't make it, when you don't have to work for it. Working through the government, it is printed and massive amounts are cut off the top, off the bottom, off the middle, and hidden. It is open. So they will pay very, very handsomely in order to make sure that the R&D is done, the projects are under shield, that they're an arm's length difference, and then somebody else can file the patent and retain the ongoing revenue. It's a whole game that occurs in order to hide secrets from you, the taxpayer, who is paid into these programs. Now I'm continuing here. Bell Labs will upgrade the network to 5G in the future, though it didn't give a time scale for the project. Now, with the level of where we're at today with 5G, don't you think it would make sense that 5G would be put on the moon and 5G would be tested on the moon and 5G would be the predominant technology being used, not 4G, given the date that we're at and the technology available? Again, scratching my head. All right, reading here. Telecom equipment supplier Nokia will use a $14.1 million grant to build the moon's first wireless network as part of NASA's plans to establish a human presence there. Now, again, why a grant? You don't have to pay it back. R&D is paid for, and there's really no accountability. Here you go. Thanks for chipping in. NASA already invested $370 million in projects to support life on the moon. There you go. This is why the Space Force was created. The Space was created because we are already off planet. Any of the major companies, you go down the list, Apple, Google, Amazon, they're all creating ways to get off the planet, and they already have technology off the planet. You know, the only thing that I can look at with this, and I've kind of joked, is one of the lines in the Bible is, and the meek will inherit the earth. Now, Elon Musk has made a statement that he doesn't mind dying on Mars as long as he doesn't die on impact. The extreme wealthy, who, by the way, during COVID and shutdown, where you and I may have struggled, have increased their wealth by trillions of dollars. These individuals don't act or think or behave like you and I. And their off-planet is a survival. They will go and leave us to whatever happens on this planet. Now, what's interesting about that is, does that tie into the meek will inherit the earth? Will those who are brave and bolden and rich with money develop something else? Well, we do know through Corey Good and David Wilcock that a series of programs have existed for decades and decades, where we have sent slaves off planet to explore, to work, to build, to go for resources. So whether or not we believe in that path, whether or not it is a true conspiracy theory, and again, I've already defined that, the fact is there's more than what we're aware of. And President Donald Trump has assigned a space force to protect us, or assigned a space force. And Nokia was just granted $14 million by NASA to create a phone network on the moon. So let's look at this next one. Now, we all know that when things are launched into space, we're not told about everything that goes, what's in the payload. So we might have especially with the private companies, we don't have a right to know. But what if 20% of each of the payload goes up there, has something that they don't want us to know about? What if it's 60%? How many international space stations do we actually have? If you don't think something can be built in space, what is the International Space Station? That's a man-made object that circulates around our planet like a satellite and was built by items from Earth put up into space. Yes, we are building off planet, whether it's intermediary or on other surfaces. So as we look at this series, we've got with Starlink, SpaceX continues to push the bounds of reusing rockets. How many rocket launches are happening that we're not even aware of? This was 1 day ago with Ars Technica. SpaceX has made launching rockets almost seem routine. Now the next article. SpaceX has launched 60 new Starlink internet satellites and nailed rocket landing at sea. This was 2 days ago on space.com, on msn.com. SpaceX successfully launched a full stack of Starlink internet satellites today. How many is the total that they've launched? What are those satellites actually doing? We've already seen from a release from Donald Trump that the satellites are so precise that from space, they can see through the window of your home into your kitchen. They can read license plates on cars. And we've also been informed that the ability to carry weapons exists. SpaceX is working with Microsoft to build a satellite network that can detect the launch of nuclear. Here we go. A Business Insider on MSN, this was 2 hours ago. SpaceX is building experimental satellites with infrared sensors able to detect ballistic cruise missiles. Again, once it hits the news, it's already happened. So this was 2 hours ago. So I want to bring you to the reason why I'm doing this today. I came across a phenomenal article on YouTube, and this was by Lex Fridman. And let me just read this right here. David Fravor is a Navy pilot of 18 years and primary witness in one of the most credible UFO sightings in history. Again, primary witness. David was the pilot in the fighter jet who recorded this video. At the time, he was a CO, a commanding officer, and had full authority. So if we look at this, I've marked the pages. There's a great lead up, and then at about 1 hour and 20 minutes, he goes from his background into talking specifically about this encounter. And then at about 1 hour and 33 minutes, he goes back into that topic. So around that time is the core. And then they go in to talk more about Luis Elizondo and Blink-182's Tom DeLonge and To the Stars and Harry Reid and George Knapp on his radio program who helped parlay the story. There's quite a bit going on here. And as I said, we need to know the truth of who we are. We need to know where we came from in order to really leap into the future. There are those on the planet that know the truth. And we need to know the truth in order to be able to protect ourselves and also to step into who we really are. We are told as humans that we are one of the most amazing species ever created. And yet look at how we're treated on this planet and how others treat us and how we treat ourselves. But when we step back and see a view from the International Space Station of this absolutely blue planet with white clouds, it's just peaceful and calming to our hearts. The sight is magical. And I hope that we can retain that thought and that vision as we go to bed each night and search for the truth. And when we wake up in the morning and we leap into our day, we know that there is more to us than this body. There is more to the story than we've been told. And if in fact you're on the path of a conspiracy theory, stop and listen. Listen to your heart, your soul, your own body, your own mind, your own higher self. Make your voice loud enough, louder than the propaganda that we have been given. So again, this interview with Lex Fridman and David Fravor is, it runs about 3 hours. The 5-minute news clips on the news are more than we generally get. Normally it's about 15 to 30-second cycles, and then they go off on the facts, which is opinion, as we've seen, as journalism is slid. But here's over 3 hours of the person who actually witnessed this, who retired after a Top Gun fighter jet pilot. He knows what's in the skies. In this article, he also talks about what was under the water. He was miles out in the sea when this saw. They were called out there to look at what this item was. And there was something under the waters in the form of a cross, of which he described like the size of maybe what a 747 would be under the water, and the white water that was being created above it. There's a lot more to this story than what we were told. So here we go. I really hope that you take time. At least listen to it in the background while you're doing something else. There's more to who we are. We have an opportunity to wake up. We have an opportunity to run forward. Blessings to us all. This has been Pink Glue on October 20th, 2020. The full story, UFO Tic Tac, episode 142.